welcome. Welcome to Art with Grace and with a face bomb of color. So, here today I'm going to be teaching you about watercolors. Now, watercolors come in many forms. Sometimes they come in forms of tubes, as you see here, or sometimes they come in this rack form that you see here. Now, depending on what type of watercolors you're using, you will have to treat them differently. You are able to do different things with rack watercolors that you can do with tube form. But tube form has its own benefits, and so does the rack. So, with tube watercolors, as you see here, they're much easier to mix, and you get a lot out of one drop. It's insane how much you get out of one drop. You barely have anything, and then you're just like, bam! Okay, that's nice. And then plus, it's also you have more flexibility to mix colors. That's one of the main benefits with tube watercolors, and it's just easier in general to mix colors. Now, if you were using rack watercolors, as I like to call them, with here, you can still mix them, but it's a lot more difficult to mix them, and it takes a lot longer because you're going back and forth, trying to mix your colors, and you have to clean your brush every single time, and it's kind of a pain. On the contrary, with like the tubes, you can just toss them in a palette or a little container like this, mix them together, and it's fairly simple, and I will demonstrate that in a moment. Those are the benefits, but also, these come with their own benefits as well. Watercolors that come in a rack, with the colors that you mix, you are able to reuse them. Like here, I have mixed some colors previously in the past. If I were to wet these again, I would be able to use these colors once more, even though they were not the original colors and I just mixed them. So, I will now demonstrate an example. Today we are going to be testing the tube watercolors more, but I will also give an example right now of what it's like whenever you use one versus what you use with the rack. Now I'm going to choose violet because the violet is very vibrant with the tube ones. I already know from my test earlier. And also this set is also very vibrant as well with the violet. But you will see the differences. So right here, I'm just gonna, give me a moment. So right here, I just added a drop of color. That's actually a lot for what I'm doing, but that's fine because I'm gonna use it later anyways. I just toss in the paint and then you add water. I'm gonna use a spray bottle, or not. The spray bottle's being difficult. Okay. I'm just going to spray it down. And then I'm going to use the spatula here to mix it. Now you can use your brush to mix it, but I just use a spatula because it came with the kit that I had. And that was what it was made for, to mix. It was mainly mixed for mixing colors as well, but yes, you can use it as well for this purpose. Now then, that's how you deal and use the tube kind of watercolors. With using the rack you have to mix them down together and have to wait a moment. I will show you in just a second. As soon as it opens, like it should, sometimes it likes to be difficult. There we go. As you can see, it's been well used, but that's okay. It still works for demonstrating. Now up there is the violet we're using. Now, probably should mix that more. Spray bottle, do what you're told. Now we're gonna have to wait a few seconds for that to just soak in some color, but we will soon see what will happen. So as that's happening, I will show you what the tube violet will be like on this paper. Right here, we have the tube violet. And that's what it looks like. You see how vibrant it looks and how strong the color is already? Well, I have an example of what it'll look like dried because I already did this once. And now I'm going to clean it off. And now the rack watercolors should be ready. Right here. And then, as you see, the tube turned out much darker. But I put about equivalent amount of water for both of them, even though it's just a little bit dried out there. But still, it's fairly decent comparison. Here was another comparison I did. And let's see if you can guess which one it was. Up top is what the tube looks like dried, and down below is what the rack looks like dried. You see how the colors are similar, but whenever it comes to mixing tubes are superior for making the color you want. But if you want to reuse them, the racks are superior. Now that we have demonstrated this and we have seen what we can do, I will now show you what to do whenever you get a set of watercolors. Whenever you get a set of watercolors, whenever you look at them, like this gold, like this yellow orchard or whatever it's called, the outside does not look pretty. But whenever you look at the outside, those don't necessarily tell you what the real color underneath is. So I had already done this for you. These are all the colors laid out. So this was the black, this was the burnt amber, burnt sienna, sap green, deep green, Prussian blue, violet, crimson red lake, vermilion, yellow orchard, which as you see turned out this pretty orange-like color, unlike this very different yellowy color on the outside, and then lemon yellow. So this is why you always test and you know your watercolors. People do this all the time. They'll make a list and just put the names on the side, and then they'll just take a streak, or they'll just do some different tests. Normally I just do like a streak test and just put a good amount and just let it go out. Now these watercolors here are student grade, which are pretty good for whenever you're starting out. Now if you really want to really test, now that you know what your colors are, you work on a work of art. And that's what we will be doing today. We're going to test what this will be, how these watercolors will look. Now, depending on what brush you're using, it will affect what shapes are easiest to do. Now, if you want like more rectangular strokes or more edgy things, like things with strong edges, you want to use a flat brush like this. Now, if you want to make some like nice curves on things, you want to use something like this, a brush that's like pointed. And you always want to use a watercolor brush whenever you can. You can use all-purpose brushes, but the thing with all-purpose brushes is that they're not made to retain water the same way, and oftentimes they just don't last as long and are unable to handle watercolors to the full extent that you're really going to be using them at. So, whenever you can, it may cost you like $8 for a brush. Try to get yourself a nice watercolor brush or a few of them. Ideally, you want at least 2, but you can work with 1. And if you were to choose one, you probably want to go one with a pointed tip. Now, this is my little friend here. This is from a character from Gris, or at least inspired. This isn't exactly what they look like, but it looks close enough. And we are naming this one Dottie. I always like to name my little characters because it's fun to do. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this top leafy part like almost like purple. But I'm also going to layer the colors. This violet, this very strong violet color. As you can see, it's already so strong, the color, as the base color for these leaves. Because there's no rule with colors here on what they have to be. Who says the leaves can't be purple or violet? And it's so very strong. I will also show you what lifting is, which I have not done with tube watercolors before, but it should work the same, in theory. So I'm just painting it and just filling it in with the pointed tip. As you can see, this part kind of has a lot of watercolor. So what I'm going to do is just take a napkin, just napkin nearby or something like that, which I always have napkins nearby. It's always good to have napkins nearby whenever you're using watercolors. And just place it on top. Just soak in some of the color. And it can just take some of that excess color off. Now this follows a technique called lifting, and now you look, it's fairly even throughout, which is very nice. I did not actually expect it to be that even throughout. I'm gonna be honest here. Turned out much nicer than I expected. These are really nice watercolors. They were gifted to me actually. Now I'm gonna use, I think, Crimson Red Lake as the base for this. I'm just gonna add a little bit more color. Boop. Just add a little bit more, and I will probably make a version where it's mixed with the vermilion as well. And perhaps even some of the yellow ochre. Come out, you little paint. That's gonna be interesting mixing it. Oh boy, this color is gonna be strong. I'm gonna take my spatula once more and just mix them together. Alright. Now, here's a trick with watercolors. If you want a watercolor to be lighter, you have the brush more watered down and more wet. Now, if you want something to look faded on the paper, what you do is you pre-wet the paper. In this case, I don't want to make anything really look faded at all. Not even remotely. So I'm not even gonna do that. As you can see here, it's slowly being mixed in. And we're making pretty colors. Actually, some of the purple remained in the brush, which I'm actually kind of happy about, even though I meant to clean it better, because it makes it look a lot more pretty. So I think I'm gonna take some of the purple and mix it with the red a bit. Because it adds more vibrance and just more contrast. Now keep in mind, you can always layer your watercolors, but you have to be careful because whenever you layer them, you always risk unleashing the layer below. What do you mean by unleashing, you may ask? Well, I mean that simply, whenever you're using watercolors, it's wet. They're activated by water. Whenever they're activated by water, there's always a chance that you will accidentally activate more than you want to activate. So you end up in a situation where you don't want something, but it happens. Simply how it goes. Now, as you see, I'm making this a little bit stronger in the orangey red on top to the right side. I'm also going to use the lifting technique on that part in a bit. But I'm going to wait a moment, and I'm just going to do a little bit more coloring first of the top part. And that was the pure red color I had earlier. Here you go. Now I'm going to take a paper towel or napkin, press it down, lift it. As you can see, the part that I left on longer came out a lot more red. It actually retained the pigment more, I should say, which is true. If you want to make that not happen, you just put some water on whatever you're using, and the pigment will lift off more. So let's say here, you want to lift off some pigment. This is called lifting, where you just lift the pigment off your artwork. I quite love this technique because it really brings out some lightness in your design, and sometimes like gives it a more textured look. One of my favorite techniques you can do is lifting. Now, I'm going to continue just a little bit more, and we're almost done here actually. And you can see, and you continue this, and normally you would do a few different artworks or use more colors than I am, but I'm using not that many for simply the sake of time. And I'm going to do the same thing again, but I'm gonna add a little bit, probably going to add some ochre yellow a bit too as well on top. And I'm taking this, so I'm painting this very quickly because I can. Now, if you notice right now, some of the colors bleeding over, which in this case is quite alright for the effect I want. So I don't mind, but you have to watch out for that for some people, depending on what you want. Now then, I think I want to do a little bit more lifting, so I'm gonna spritz this paper towel down actually a few times. And just lift up. There's a tad here and there, some color. Just to make it look more rustic, because this is actually supposed to be a rock creature. So that looks so even. Now, because the color is so bold, I'm going to take some of it off and lift it. As you can see, it's quite a bit. So I'm actually going to toss some water on here, because this also helps with lifting. Like I said, lifting is one of my favorite techniques. You just lift it up, all the pigment. Now I'm going to take some of the yellow ochre, and then probably take off some more here, some color here, more, take off some more, and then we're just gonna toss some yellow ochre in my pan. if it wants to come out, I think I'm gonna have to make a bigger hole later for it. But that's okay. That's for later. And you always want to seal your tubes up tightly if you have tubes, because if you don't, you risk drying out your paint and you're kind of stuck if it dries out. Like, there is really no undoing whenever tube watercolors are dried out. Like, there's not an undo button for that one. You can wet for rack ones. You can deal with that much better, and it's much easier to deal with. But here, no, not so much. So I'm just gonna toss it here, and then we're nearly done, just for testing the watercolors. And you get to see your colors in action on how they mix, how they interact in different ways. And you can always layer it. For the sake of this video, I did pre-make this little guy. A Sharpie. I did sketch this out if you would like to sketch this out for doing yourself. Take a pencil. You want to hold it by the end. You don't want to hold it by the tip, because then it makes really hard lines and makes it annoying to erase later if you're planning to erase this. You always hold it from the tip, and you also want to use your arm to draw. It's not good to use your wrist because it actually increases the likelihood you're gonna injure your wrist. So, now we're nearly done with our little creation. I think I will just use some Prussian blue on top of these leaves. Once the color of the orchard yellow seeps in a little bit more, and then I'll use some lifting, and then we'll be done. Some more of the Prussian blue. I'm a little bit concerned that this seems very bubbly and has a lot of air in it. So I don't think, even though the tube looks big, I don't think I really have that much Prussian blue, which is kind of concerning to me. Maybe I can get some more later. But I'm gonna use this tip again. And I just chose the mixer right now like this. And now there's a lot of pigment in this brush. So I'm gonna water it down a bit. And dip it. And just line it. Just line it up with the Prussian blue. Just add some shadow. Now I'm gonna add some little streaks to represent the center of the leaf. Now I'm gonna use lifting now on our good old trusty friend. But it's always good to test your colors to see how they look together. Sometimes you like the look, sometimes you don't. I'm kind of on the fence at the current moment, but then again, we haven't been using this color often yet. Looks like the Prussian blue doesn't stick very quickly, but that's okay, I can put more on. I accidentally scooped it up unintentionally. Toss some more. Maybe even spritz it down directly. You can also do that. Some people do that. I normally don't like doing that, but it was one of those cases where I'm gonna be lifting a lot. Actually, I think this calls for a case of using the white watercolor, which I thought I might have to use. Did I open it? Yes, I opened it already. Now, a lot of people don't use white watercolors. Some people do. I like using white watercolors. Normally people use it as a mixing color, if they do use it. And where did my brush go? There it is. Oh no. It makes what's the orchard yellow a bit, but that's okay. Actually, I think I'll like it. Now you just layered it on. As you can see, the colors came out very vibrantly whenever I tested them. So I think I'm just about ready done. Not my nicest thing in the world, but that's okay. We're just testing after all. Now, if you want to use all your colors for testing, go ahead. But I'm just going to use a few, and for the sake of time, I'm probably going to let this dry and show you the finished result as a picture. So, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a lovely evening or a lovely day, whatever time of the day it is for you. Bye!